Okay, we need to talk about something here because recently I've met quite a number of people that they like the idea of reading, but they just can't do it. Like they just absolutely do not enjoy it, and it's like actually grueling to them. And if that sounds anything at all like you, then you're in the right place, because we're gonna go ahead and dive into like why that is. Like, why don't we enjoy reading? And more importantly, find some ways to hopefully fix that. I do want to be very clear here that this is my own personal experience with this. I did do quite a bit of research on it, but I do still want to preface this by saying that, and that I know that this is probably not universal, but this is what worked for me. And hopefully by me sharing this, it will allow you to have a better idea of what you can do to find more enjoyment in reading. There's just something so magical about reading someone's life experience or lesson or whatever it is that they learned over years and years and years, and they condense it down into this fine little like nugget of wisdom that you can just ingest in like 6 hours. Like, I just find that so cool. So when I hear that people don't like reading, I'm like, what can I do to help? This video is going to cover 3 different topics. And the first one is called the imagination muscle. Now this is very, very interesting because in our world today, most of the time we don't actually have to use our imagination that often. You know, you watch a movie or something and they show you images and pictures, so your brain doesn't have to do the work of creating those from scratch. And same thing with YouTube videos. You know, you have people talking, overlaying what they're saying with images, showing you kind of, you know, and it prevents you from flexing that muscle. For example, if I say that once upon a time there was an elephant named, I don't know, Sputnik or something, like instantly your mind is like creating an elephant in your mind. And if you know anything about space and satellites, that elephant was like riding Sputnik or something. I don't know, it's something random. But you see, like your mind created that on its own, just bam, out of the blue. Now let's go with something different. Now if I say once upon a time there was a mouse with pink fur, you see, by showing you the images associated with what I was saying, that didn't allow your imagination to kick in and take over and actually create something. And therefore your imagination muscle wasn't being flexed. The problem is that because when you read, you have to mentally create all of what you are reading in your mind. Like, you create visual pictures of what you are reading on the page. And I think that's why children enjoy reading so much, because, you know, their imaginations are eager to jump in and just like grab hold of anything and just spin it wild and just make it awesome. But then we get older and we don't have to use our imagination quite as much, and then it gets harder to use it actually. It's kind of weird. And so then when you go to read a book, you like make it a page and you're just like, oh man, this is like exhausting. So your imagination muscle, as I call it, you know, I don't even know if that's even a term, I just made it one, is like any other muscle. You use it and you flex it and it grows. It gets more adaptable. It enlarges and it can do more without getting tired. And vice versa. You know, you don't use it as much and it gets weaker. That's why, like, for myself, when I was trying to get back into reading, I'd like grab a book, sit down and just like read for like an hour and a half like I used to, and then just be totally wiped out and just be like, well, this is dumb. Like, I'm more tired now that I started than before. And the reason was because I didn't like really build up to it. I just tried to jump right back to where I was without giving my mind kind of time to readapt into that process of letting the imagination work and letting it grow and become strong again. When it comes to the solution, it's basically pretty straightforward. How would you strengthen any other muscle? You give it time, you work on it, you practice, and it grows over time. The other way is to sort of remove or take away some of the things that are diminishing that muscle, things that do that imagination for you. Having too much stimuli can play a part in making our minds become lax and kind of lazy, honestly. Part 2 of this video is called mental fatigue. Looking back, I've kind of always wondered about like, how could I read for hours on end as a kid and like not get tired? Like, now if I try to do that, my eyes kind of feel like they have headaches after about 30 minutes. And I did a little bit of digging on this, and I actually figured out there's actually a pretty tangible reason for why this happens, and pretty easy way to fix it actually. I found this so fascinating when I figured it out, and I'll try to illustrate it as best I can so that you can understand it the way I did. The first place we're gonna start is that you have to understand when you read, your eye doesn't move in a straight line. It actually does little fixations, which is basically a bounce, and it takes a little snapshot of the words, and then you read those words. And so to kind of get a feel for this, you can actually feel your eye do this. So if you close your eye and put your finger on your eyelid and then bring your eye over to one side and then move it to the other side, you can try as hard as you want to bring that in a straight line with your eye closed, but your eye will just boop, 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 jump across, and you'll actually feel it on your finger. And these little fixations are really, really fast. They're about a half a second to a fourth of a second. And they, at about 8 inches away from a page, they're usually about the size of a quarter. Now here's what's really interesting, because whenever we do this, our eye doesn't always go perfectly horizontal. So whenever your eye jumps to the next little fixation, it sometimes will jump up a little bit or jump down a little bit, and you'll actually end up rereading some of the exact same things that you've already read. People who aren't trained to do this properly and don't use the correct techniques will engage in what's called regression, which is conscious rereading, and they'll also do back skipping, where they actually reread because of misplaced fixations. And here's the craziest part: those regressions and back skippings can take up to 30% of the total reading time. This is why it can be very exhausting if you don't do this correctly, because you actually end up rereading and like back reading and just bouncing all over the place whenever you're reading, because you're back skipping or jumping up. Your fixations aren't correct. Your peripheral vision is grabbing too much, like up and down and back, when it should be going forward. And in just a second, we'll talk about how to fix that so that you don't have regressions and back skippings. But before we do that, there's one other thing along these lines that I want to cover, and that is our words per minute actually plays a portion in this as well, because we oftentimes say the words in our minds when we read. Now here's why this is a problem: because you can hear about twice as fast as you can speak. So while you're reading and saying those words in your mind, your brain is only being used at like half capacity. So the other half of your brain is running ahead, running over here, trying to figure out things and like running on other trails of thought. That's why when someone is talking to you, it's very easy to get sidetracked or to interrupt them, because your brain can hear twice as many words as what you're getting. So you've got some, like, your brain is just kind of getting bored. So let's talk solution here, because this is the main reason why I hated reading so much and it exhausted me. So first things first, fixations need to be done correctly. So the way to read so that your fixations aren't going backwards or up or down is by using a pointer. So a really good illustration of this is look on one side of the room and then try to keep your eye as steady as you can and go all the way to the other side of the room. You'll find the same thing. You can't, your eye bounces. Now, if you take your finger and you do that exact same thing and you focus on your finger, you can do the whole thing perfectly smooth. Your eye doesn't bounce at all because you're focusing on your finger, which is a constant and it's moving. Same thing applies when you read. This is why whenever we're taught how to read, we're taught to use a pointer or a finger or a pen or something like that to keep our eyes trained on where we are going and where we want our eyes to be. So a logical solution to this: use a pen, use your finger, use something to trace where you want your eyes to go over the words, and it will keep your eye from bouncing and skipping or regressing any of the words. So you instantly, just by using a pointer, will increase your reading time, first of all, by 30%, because you're no longer doing these regressions, and it instantly takes that eye strain away and the confusion, because you're not rereading things or reading things that are above where you're supposed to be reading. That simple little thing had the most profound effect out of anything that I'm sharing with you. So I would really encourage you to at least try it. It will help quite a bit. The other thing is subvocalization. Now, subvocalization is where you say the words in your head whenever you are reading them on the page. Now, this is completely unnecessary. You don't need to say those words in your head to understand them. People often have the misguided notion that when you read, a good retention is remembering the words that you read. And that's generally not true, because when you're reading, the purpose of those words is to build a picture in your head. So when you're done reading, you should remember the picture in your head, not the individual words. So back to subvocalization. Like I said, this is completely unnecessary because, okay, say you pull up to a stop sign, you don't see that word and say stop in your mind. You see the word and you know what it means and you do the action. Same thing applies to when you read. As you read, you can learn and train yourself to simply recognize the word and know what it means without actually saying it in your mind. And by doing this, for one, it'll almost double your reading time, which is pretty awesome. And it'll keep your mind from wandering, because you're then reading as fast as your brain can comprehend. And if you combine that with a pointer, you'll have very dramatically increased reading time. My other suggestion is that if this is still something that's difficult, try using audiobooks, because that will begin training your mind to think in those mental pictures, and it'll begin working your imagination again. If you go with something like Audible, you're getting pretty expensive, and that's why most people don't do it. That's why I use a app called Scribd or Scribd. This app is for audiobooks, and you can also read regular books on there as well. They have a huge selection, and the reason why I like it is because you don't pay per book. You pay a monthly subscription upfront, and you get unlimited access to any book that you want, for as many books as you want as well. Like, I think there's a cap if you do like 30 books a month or something like that. It'll like, back off some of the popular titles. But like, you have to do an insane amount. So it's $9 per month with unlimited access to however many books you want. And they have a large selection of audiobooks. It's probably not as large as some of the bigger companies like Audible, but it is well worth it. And here's the cool part. Just when you sign up, you'll instantly get 1 month for free. But if you sign up under my affiliate link, which is down in the description, it'll give you 2 months for free. So sign up, you get 2 months for free. That's enough to go through several books, and then just cancel it if you don't want it. It's kind of a no-brainer, honestly. The last part of this video, wow, I should really stop playing with this pen. It's probably really distracting. It's kind of fun though. The last part of this video is called priority shifts. And this is something that I noticed when I started reading again. I read a lot up until about 14, and then took a break for about 5 years, and I just didn't really read anything. And then when I tried to get back into it, I didn't really know where to start, and so I just started right where I left off. Not really realizing that my interests and priorities and things like that had shifted pretty dramatically from when I was 14, obviously. I would start reading and I would just get frustrated and annoyed because the books weren't nearly as enjoyable as I remembered. And it took me a second to realize, like, oh, you know what? I'm actually not really interested in this anymore. Scrap these. I'm gonna go towards what I'm actually finding enjoyable. And like, it sounds kind of obvious, right? But it's actually surprisingly hard sometimes to keep that in mind. Like, you have to be pretty self-aware about, like, what your interests are and where you want to pour your time. And so if you're not in tune with that, it can be very dull and very, I don't know, tiring almost to sludge through some of these things that you were interested in, but you're not so much interested in now. The solution for me in this area was obviously pretty straightforward. It was just to be more in tune with what my interests were, but at the same time, not to be afraid to like branch out and broaden my interests as well, and dabble in certain things to see if I would enjoy those. For example, I really don't enjoy reading like old classics. Have I ever read one? Nope. So why don't I enjoy them? I don't know. I just decided I don't like them. And I don't know, it's probably because they're like big, thick books and they look intimidating when I was a kid, and so I just never read them. Like, that's a pretty good example of like me being stupid about not broadening my horizons. Like, come on. There's no good reason not to at least try it. And I think reading is one of the best ways to, broaden your horizons, get a wider view of the world. And my brother is incredible at this. He reads like 100 books a year, 90 to 100 books a year. And he knows a little bit about everything. Like, his information and his mind is so broad. It's just so cool. Like, you can't have a conversation with him where he doesn't know at least something about what you're talking about. It's really awesome. I'll be like, hey Reagan, did you know that the Great Wall of China was built during the Ming Dynasty between 1368 and 1644? It was mostly built to keep the northern invaders out, like the Mongols. Yeah, cool. Good talk. Books carry so much condensed wisdom about stuff that you can consume and grow so much just from reading one. An entire month, I'll just read like so much about this one topic, and boy, at the end of it, I know like everything about it. And that's kind of a problem sometimes, because I can tend to focus on like this aspect, whereas what I'm saying here is like my brother tends to be a little bit more spread out and a little bit wider knowledge on a lot of stuff, which is really good. You definitely need both. Otherwise your world will be very narrow and very small. And that's another reason why he can talk to literally anybody. Like, I mean, you bring up pretty much any topic and he knows something about it, and he can talk about it and carry a conversation about it. I mean, you bring up like Sputnik to me and I'm gonna think it's like the name of a dolphin somewhere in a movie. Like, I don't know what that is. So anyway, like I said, these are some of my own experiences and some of the things that I did to kind of work through this and to find enjoyment in reading again and to not have to work so hard to just to get through a book. With that being said, as always, stay creative, and I'll see you in the next video. And I'll stop, pen spinning during videos because I'm sure that's really distracting. So anyway, yeah.